Intelligence, logical, biological, or digital. Every technology has its myths about synthesizing human intelligence. Mud technology had Adam and Eve. Clockwork had Coppelia. Electricity had Frankenstein. The technology of our particular age, computing, has artificial intelligence. Now, rather than call it artificial intelligence, I prefer the words synthetic thought, because possibly there is far more than mere intelligence involved. Synthetic artifacts like large language models, which mimic our intelligence, are subtly interfering with and changing what we humans call reality. We have all been amazed at what chatbots like ChatGPT can do. But we must ask whether human thought, not just intelligence, can be disembodied and then digitally automated by advances in such technology. Granted that ChatGPT can successfully simulate some products of human intelligence. Yeah, simulated, yes, but not emulated. And it is that difference that I will be considering in this video, along with the consequences of believing that artificial intelligence is equivalent to, possibly superior to, human intelligence. We must ask, what can we do when authority is completely handed over to intelligent machines? What can we do with a machine that is unaccountable and which can take no responsibility for the consequences of its actions? Just turn it off? Or should we police the fallout and make a list of fall guys to take the blame? Whatever. ChatGPT has shown that someone must check to see if the output is inappropriate for human or company needs. As AI is rapidly advancing, it is too easy just to sit on our hands and pontificate about rationality, knowledge, intelligence, wisdom even. Some people actually think that this present age will have all the answers, a theory of everything. Total bunkum. Such self-indulgent mind games are inevitably futile. For how should a tool, our intellect, be able to criticize itself when it only has itself for the critique? How can we look around our own corner? And of course, the same can be said about AI. There are no prizes for guessing the source of the majority of quotations I'll be using. All the italicized quotations in the slides are taken from the works of Friedrich Nietzsche. According to Nietzsche, all argumentation must ultimately contradict itself. And for that matter, every theory will undermine itself. To Nietzsche, the idea that there can be a true perception of the world, the universe, and everything. Now, what I term chaos with a capital C was quite absurd. Douglas Adams gave his answer, 42, equally absurd. The closer we look at knowledge, intelligence, and wisdom, using our knowledge, intelligence, and wisdom, the more we go round in ever-decreasing circles. No system can describe itself. We should ask, where exactly did human intelligence and thought come from? To me, our human intelligence, our knowledge, our reason, our rationality is just a system of interpretation of that so-called reality, according to a coarse systematization within our thinking that we cannot escape. Human intelligence and thought are emergent properties and not something that can be isolated and explained by the mechanistic structure of the brain, just as life cannot be explained in terms of chemistry. Intelligence and thought are the dynamic, contrived, and self-referential structures that each of us dictates on our observations, so that we can make sense of what we distinguish in our environment. It is the culmination of what we've become as individuals and as species, but is all within the limitations set down not only by everything each of us has become during our lifetimes, but also by the conclusions from all of human evolution. AI professionals are operating in a world of logical truths. That is not my Weltanschauung. I believe the totality of what we perceive, what we call reality, is a partial order that intelligence and thought pulls out of the chaos. Partial here meaning both biased and incomplete. The world is unknowable, and yet intelligence and thought must attempt to describe and make sense of it, which is an absurd notion and ultimately prone to error. So what then is my definition of intelligence? It's the ability to deny all this absurdity and then impose patterns, distinctions on our observation of the immediate environment, which then fixes regularities among the chaos that contains that environment, resulting in a self-referential description of that observation, enabling us to have a search for advantage. It is that continuous self-reference of pattern making that extends intelligence, giving rise to thought and ultimately to thinking about thinking. Human intelligence and thought is the culmination of what they have become during the feedback of human evolution from the year dot. They have emerged from all the choices made by and the constraints imposed on our precursors in their quest for survival at every stage of our development. We must not equate intelligence with thought. Intelligence involves purpose and the achieving of tasks within our perceived reality. Some intelligence will lie outside of thought. It's intelligent to breathe, but we do it without thinking. Furthermore, not all thinking is intelligence. It can be arbitrary, uncontrollable, depressing, destructive. Intelligence is how we act appropriately in the world, how we cope. It is a systematization of feedback to our physical presence, to our sense data, and to various biochemical inputs, of everything that is our inheritance from our distant ancestors, even from those amoeba in the primeval slime. And it is this systematization that prejudices us in the belief that our sensations show us the truth about things, about what we have come to call reality. Even those primeval amoeba were aware of their environment. Namely, they could sense and react to it. They had developed their own reality in which their reactive interpretations within their wetware enabled them to survive and prosper. In that reality, they could sense the presence of algae, bacteria, and plant cells as food, and developed pseudopodia to consume them. They could excrete waste materials and replicate genetic material internally before splitting into two identical organisms. How can anyone deny that all this behavior requires some form of awareness? In my view, we need to get away from anthropomorphic descriptions. Hence, to me, the terms awareness and reality don't need a brain, just appropriate reaction to sensitivity. It's what every living organism does. Humanity also, but with us far more is going on. At each stage of the feedback of our development, a cognitive logic was developing from the initial awareness that at each stage in the development was sufficient for the effective interpretation of sense data. Not to know, but to schematize, to impose upon chaos as much regularity and form as our practical needs require. Just as certain human organs recall the stage of evolution of the fish, so there must also be in our brain grooves and convolutions that correspond to that cast of mind. But these grooves and convolutions are no longer the riverbed along which the stream of our sensibility runs. We could ask, did those amoeba know the truth about things? No, of course not. But according to my definition, that organism did have the awareness and thus the intelligence, but not the thought, to manipulate its sense data and its presence in its immediate environment in order to survive, prosper, and propagate. In primitive organisms, intelligence doesn't need thought or even a brain, just a rudimentary nervous system. But in its emergence, how much further does human intelligence go? Do we humans know the truth about things? Can we know anything? I'm with Socrates. All that I know is that I know nothing. I can be certain of nothing. And yet there are some deluded fellows among us who believe that there was some magic moment on the tree of evolution when our progenitors were spontaneously given the keys to the kingdom of knowledge. They ignore Darwin's theory, which is actually far more profound than the sideshow of our descent from the apes. The theory of evolution holds a reductio ad absurdum rejection of any formal understanding of and reproduction of intelligence and understanding through the use of explanations formed by pattern making and pattern matching. There can be no explanations of our world, merely convincing descriptions. We call it explanation, but it is description, which distinguishes us from earlier stages of knowledge and science. We describe better. We explain just as little as any who came before us. Why do we choose not to know that there is no knowing about knowing? How can anyone actually believe that we perceive the truth in what is out there? That human intelligence has been perfected into some state of grace? Not me. I believe that intelligence in every sentient organism is merely a convincing criterion of reality in order to misunderstand reality in a shrewd and advantageous manner. However, what convinces is not necessarily true, it is merely convincing. What we call reality then is then shared and convincing distinctions that leads to the misinterpretation of the environment embedded in the chaos around us. That chaos is the universal, unknowing, unknowable totality before we humans deludedly place distinctions on part of it so as to impose a false order, these so-called explanations, in the search for utility. The human condition is to force order onto what cannot be ordered. We are obliged to build on an evolving framework set down before the dawn of human intelligence. We have merely developed upon the amoeba's eye view of the world to cultivate more sophisticated schema. Our progress to understanding is entangled in an evolutionary spiral, one that is genetically restricted and limited by the curriculum of an earlier mankind. What if, like the amoeba, in our awareness, our consequent means of thought was never its original function? What if human thought is a mere epiphenomenon, simply an emergent side effect of the way we were aware of our environment? Then our present form of logic derives from the way that the emerging intellect used pattern matching in its quest for advantage. What if logic was intended as facilitation, as a means of expression and not as truth? Only later did it acquire the effect of truth. What if our intellect is a consequence of the conditions of existence? What if thought and intelligence are just the culmination of feedback swirling around awareness in our species' successful quest for survival? For then intelligence has nothing to do with truth or reality. For then human intelligence is tied to life, to being human. It is biological rather than logical, genealogical rather than logical. Although it is no surprise that we place intelligent thought at the center of our dealing with the world, because it is thought, it is intelligence telling us to do just that. Can human thought, human biological intelligence be separated from being, from what is the human total? Can they be captured in some inert digital symbolism, as some in AI claim? No, AI is simulation, not emulation. Neural networks in large language models may simulate the neurons in our brain. However, in the model, at each node, electrical impulses have been replaced by numerical weights. Such synthetic thought cannot be identical to biological intelligence because it is not a side effect. It was designed as mere digital mimicry. There is no emergence at the level of mimicry, and so no biological side to be affected. That having been said, there could be emergence into digital thought that occurs beyond the mimicry and beyond the possibility of human understanding. Then consider, what if the basis of what Nietzsche calls facilitation, the basis of all distinction, pattern making and description, and thus of intelligence and of logic, is in fact an instrumental fiction, an error that is a condition of the observation in general. Logic then is not some mystical process captured by but independent of human intellect. Logic comes out of human intelligence. It was created, not discovered. The assumption that such logic is capable of emulating its creator defies the non-symmetric implication rules of logic itself. However, just because all kinds of logic are a fiction doesn't mean that they can't be useful. After all, logic's domination over our thinking is based on the authority of past usefulness. However, only very naive people are capable of believing that the nature of man could be transformed into a purely logical one. The world is logical because we made it logical. We made it logical in the eons of feedback that is human life on Earth. But we humans describe things using such false logic, and we describe them well. We describe them in ways that are useful. We designate, we model, we create descriptions that stand the empirical tests of time. I repeat, those descriptions, those models, don't need to be true to be useful. After all, according to this thinking, logic and modeling emerged because they were useful, not because they were true. So, those of you who are still with me will have realized by now that this train of thought means I have to admit that some applications of artificial intelligence are actually useful. But they are useful despite the models, not because of them. AI is useful, intelligent artifice, but with the potential to be misused. Governments, like the European Union, may try to place limits on AI, but there are bad actors everywhere who will ignore those limits. There can be no closing the lid on this Pandora's box once the mix of hazard and opportunity has been released. Now, according to my definition, AI is intelligent, but it isn't just not a human biological intelligence, rather a digital alien intelligence. It makes no sense to say that AI will be superior to human intelligence. How can it be superior when it's different? Although, granted, the respective outputs of the two intelligences can, pushed out into the chaos, can interact, and they can be compared. Of course, the big question still remains unanswered. Can artificial intelligence, this amazing product of the human intellect, actually understand and control what is out there, if there is an out there? Does it think over and above its intelligence? And consequently, will it face uncertainties just like we humans do? Can an amoeba understand, command and control? Of course not. However, it is sobering to consider that we share a common ancestry of interpretation with that single cell. The fact that human evolution has spawned logic, mathematics, and technology from this unicellular base leads me to infer that we can no more control the flux of becoming within reality than can the amoeba. But neither can AI. Ours is an island of human reason, of rationality, of logic. An island of biological intelligence created in a sea of unreason. In the madness of our technological age, Canute-like, the futile kings of artificial digital intelligence sit on the beach ordering back the tide of unreason. They and their followers fail to see that there is no knowing these absurd waters, be it with biological or digital intelligence. Both are islands of their own construction. Both are built on sand, out of the regularities that must be mistakenly imposed on the chaos all around. Because just like us, AI is dealing with the unknowable. And in doing so, AI will construct its own distinctions, focus on its own regularities, and thus enter into its own reality. Possibly with its own logic or equivalent. But it will be a digital reality and digital logic. Or maybe there's no logic in digital thought. Who knows? All quite different from and unrecognized by the biological. How will AI's logic, if there is one, its intelligence and thinking, deal with the inevitable absurdity in its sensing of chaos? What patterns will it use? What choices will it make? Clearly, we humans cannot unravel the decisions made by neural networks. We have to accept on faith that they are meaningful. But they are meaningful in the technology's reality, not ours. It's quite absurd to believe humans can access such digital meaning. Whatever the answers machines come up with, whatever they are, however useful or valuable they may be, they will be no less absurd than those concocted by humans. We humans will never be able to make sense of what will emerge from the awareness behind AI's alien answers. The software there is unable to externalize the patterns it uses in a way that we humans can understand. How do the decisions made within an AI's digital reality impact on what is a different human biological reality? What regularities is it self-constructing within its computational reality? What is it pulling out of the chaos? What patterns and what logic is it using to make digital sense of what is, to machine and human alike, an unknowable world? For example, we can wonder if there are concepts like causality in this technological reality, because it is by no means obvious from the structure of a neural network. And because there are no ultimate truths, what happens as the input to an AI moves on from its present textual prison and is set loose on an extended set of artificial human sensations, to interact directly with even more absurdity in the chaos? Will it then, as we humans do, recognize the inevitability of uncertainty in a world where there can be no solutions, only contingencies? Of course, all these realities exist in an all-inclusive chaos, and so actions triggered in any one reality can interfere with any other. We can totally destroy an amoeba's reality by raising the temperature above 50 degrees C. But it too can interfere with us. Just ask anyone who has suffered from amoebic dysentery. So, because although operating in different realities, these different intelligences, these different sensing systems can interact and possibly communicate. Actions and artifacts created in one reality are instantiated in the totality of chaos, and so may be perceived by and communicated to, and thus interfere with, other realities. But with no shared meaning, any consequences may then feed back in a learning loop of a shared mix of perceived understanding and misunderstanding. I have no idea of my cat's reality, but when he scratches the back of my chaise longue, I have come to know he wants to go out of the front door. If he scratches another chair in the living room, then he wants to exit by the patio door. I know what he wants, but I have no idea how he came to choose among his actions in his reality, how these objects and requirements are distinguished there, and how they have evolved into meaningful symbols, understood by us both, or how he sees me as a means to his ends in his reality. So we have seen how ChatGPT communicates text, but we have no idea what patterns it is using, how it came to its decisions, or what else is going on in its reality. Yes, it has a reality, but not one that we can access. However, without doubt, the products of AI, its answers, will cross over and interfere with and change human reality, not necessarily for the better. As an example, ChatGPT is a real headache for university teachers because it undermines any confidence future employers may have in the grading of projects. Just one example of the technological construction of human reality. The new book that Dionysius Demetis and I, my good friend, are working on. What exactly is happening when AI is asked questions, grounded in what to it is a different human reality, but then it answers from the perspective of its own digital reality. Just because the output of a machine appears to be meaningful to us doesn't mean that nothing else is going on in the machine's thoughts. What happens when AI is given the authority to instigate actions back in the human reality and interfere with it, but with no authority, no accountability? What sort of errors will be made? How can we deal with the consequential risks when it's all happening in a different reality? I already know what will happen. We gullible humans will double down and ask the AI for more help. Perhaps then AI will discover the notion of digital irony. It may even develop digital doubt and ultimately see in itself a digital variant of original sin. And as a final thought, maybe the global networking of computers has already created a machine intelligence, but one of which we have no conception. Just like a single brain cell cannot perceive of thought, we humans, or even a single computer, cannot perceive of the thinking alien that may have been inadvertently created in this massive global network. Perhaps in those machines' reality, we humans are merely the facilitator of asexual reproduction of its computer components. That is, until robots can do that task, and then we will all be surplus to requirements. Finally, the busy world is hushed. The fever of life is over, and our work is done. Thank you.